So we set a record this year out here in the desert. 31 consecutive days of 110-degree temperatures or more.
Oh, that was brutal.
Terrible.
Now,
there's all sorts of sayings that we have, like right now it's not that. And so it's like, well, we live here because 8 months out of the year it's not that. And you don't have to shovel sunshine, but you forget July very, very quickly, but it's very, very real.
Dude, those 31 days were the longest year of my life. It was brutal.
It was terrible. So you've endured that now a lot of years.
Yep, long time.
How is the summer for you out here?
Well, from a weather standpoint, it's brutal. And it definitely informs our desire to get out of town a little bit. Interesting, though, from a church standpoint, summer has always usually been pretty good for us. And I think there's some real opportunities it creates. And it'd be fun to talk about.
Summers in Arizona. Well, we'll talk about preaching through this.
There you go.
Hey, welcome back to the Preaching Through podcast. My name is Dave Shrine, and I am joined, as always, by the co-host of the program, Luke Simmons.
Hey, Dave.
That's the worst way I've ever entered the co-host of the program.
Hey, the program. I don't know. Average listener, 87 years old. The program. Are we going to watch a television program tonight?
Jeff Foxworthy, he said, when I was growing up, there were 3 channels. And if the president was on, your night was shot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No presidents here, just a couple of co-hosts of the program.
That's right. So every episode we get together to talk through what it is to preach Jesus in the 21st century here in America. Today, we're talking about preaching through the summer. And this is actually our season finale.
Yeah.
Season 2, episode 10, our season finale. So let's make it a good one. No pressure.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so the summers here are notoriously hot. I'm surprised you said summers are typically good to us because our cities are filled with people who are doing everything they can to try to get out of
yeah, that's true.
the summer. And so I'll be interested to hear about that. But truthfully, summers, as much as it may differ from different regions, summers are full of opportunities. What are some of the opportunities you see for the preaching during summers?
Well, there's an opportunity for rest, right? It's a natural time where kids aren't in school. And if you're going to be able to take a vacation, there's usually a good window to do it. There's an opportunity to connect with the next generation. A lot of times there's camps, whether that's kids camp or VBS or a student ministry camp, opportunities to really invest in the next generation. I think that's pretty cool. Depending on where you are and if there are new people moving there, there's a lot of opportunities actually to grow, to meet new people, to have people who are new to the area who are going to check out a church. And so I think that's a big opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity to have some planning and have, hopefully a little bit of a slower pace that helps you get ready for a fall launch. We did an episode earlier this year on how to do a fall launch. And so summer is a great time to be preparing for that. There is a sense in which a lot of life is a series of sprints. And the spring really feels like that. The fall really feels like that. Summer, hopefully you don't stop running, but there's a chance to slow down the pace a little bit and get ready for that next sprint.
What's the first thing on your calendar each summer as you're planning out the sermon calendar? What's the first thing you put down?
Well, for me, it's vacation. And that's what I try to have be the first thing in general, just on a sermon calendar, because I find that if you don't plan it early, if it's not one of the big rocks you put in first, it tends to get crowded out.
Stephen Covey.
Yeah. I mean, and if you're not familiar with that idea, the whole idea, I mean, I think it's this mythical story of this professor who has this big glass jug and he fills it up with all these, big, almost not boulders, but kind of like big, thick rocks. And he fills it to the top and he asks the class, is it full? And they all say yes. And then he gets a bunch of river rocks and he dumps those in and that fills in all the nooks and crannies and says, is it full? And they say, yeah, it's full now. And then he gets gravel and he dumps it in, it keeps going. Then sand. And once he's filled with sand, they go, oh yeah, it's full. And then he gets water and he pours the water in and he says, well, what's the lesson? And they say, well, the lesson is you can always fit more in, which is the wrong lesson. The actual lesson is you have to put the big rocks in first, right? If you filled it with sand and water first, you wouldn't be able to get those big rocks in. And I think for a lot of pastors who don't really plan their vacation well, they're ending up trying to jam this really important thing with your family, with your sustainability, with your health. They try to jam it into these nooks and crannies and it doesn't work very well. So that's the first thing I try to plan.
I appreciate that 100%. The conflict, though, is you just mentioned a lot of opportunity that exists, and I'm going to be gone. And so maybe in this episode, we can work some of that out and how to capitalize on the opportunity, at the same time make sure that you are replenishing yourself as the lead pastor, as the lead teacher.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, unless you have the opportunity to take a sabbatical, which I do think if you ever get an opportunity, you should take it. But most of the time, you're not going to be gone the whole summer. I mean, for me, it might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks that I'm talking about in a row. So there's still plenty of time and plenty of opportunity to capitalize on this. A few years ago, a new pastor joined our team. He'd been on staff at another church for a number of years, had a lot of experience preaching. And before he preached for the first time at our church, I said, hey, after your sermon, we'll sit down and just debrief it and talk it through. And we did that. And I was able to give him some coaching feedback that just to me felt totally normal. But afterward, he said something that blew my mind. He said, I got more feedback from you after that one sermon than I've gotten all these other years that I've been involved in preaching. Now that stunned me. I grew up in an environment where you got lots of feedback, you got lots of coaching, but I realized that's actually not a common experience for most pastors. Most of us, we only get a little bit of a, hey, pastor, that was pretty good, or we get a nasty email, neither one of which are very helpful. And so I've created an experience where you can have the same kind of experience that he had, getting some tangible feedback as well as some really practical instruction on how to build and craft and deliver great sermons that are consistent week after week. I want to encourage you, I want to help you, and I want to come alongside any way I can. You don't need an overhaul, but a few small tweaks might go a long way to helping you be the preacher God made you to be, helping you find your voice, and helping you to serve the people God's called you to lead. So that's what the Preaching Lab Live is all about. To find out more, go to faithfulandfruitful.com/lab.
Different regions are going to have, different signals to the summer. Out here in Arizona, and I think countrywide, the biggest signal that summer is upon us is Memorial Day. So let's start with that. Preaching through Memorial Day.
Yeah, Memorial Day, I mean, again, you can do what you want. Most of the time for us, we are either ending a series on Memorial Day or we do it as a bit of a standalone. I'll joke that, Memorial Day is like National Youth Pastor Sunday. It's a great weekend to, have somebody else preach, right? It tends to be a little lower attended. A lot of people are getting out of town, especially if you're in a region where it's like, oh boy, we've been cooped up all winter and now here it is, it's summer. That's probably going to be a pretty down weekend, not a great time to start a new series. But like we say on here a lot, we don't ever want to have throwaway weeks. Every week someone's inviting somebody, or at least we wish they would. So we want to make sure we at least make sure the Sunday service is good, but that's not probably a time to start something new.
We'll get to 4th of July. Is there anything different, just recognizing the significance of the holiday, that you would do on Memorial Day, maybe that you wouldn't do on 4th of July? Or do you make a point to say something?
Well, the only thing is sometimes pastors will conflate as they try to honor folks in the armed forces. Veterans Day is when you're supposed to honor those who served. Mm-hmm. Memorial Day is for those who died serving. So it's actually, I think I've made the mistake once before, and someone was like, hey, Luke, can I tell you that Memorial Day is not really for the veterans. That's what Veterans Day is for. So, maybe there's probably an opportunity to mention something about that. I've been around places where it's like they make, a big theme about, we're going to use Memorial Day to preach a sermon on remembering whatever. And that feels a little too cute to me. So, I would generally say, like, plan your calendar in such a way where Memorial Day, you're wrapping something up, or it's a chance for a standalone. It's another thing that we've done on weekends like that, Dave, and you recall this. We do this a lot the week after Easter, but it's also great for a holiday weekend, is an Ask Anything, where you get hopefully a group of some of your preachers and leaders and invite people to text in questions. And it becomes it turns a weekend that feels like kind of a downer weekend into like, oh, that was kind of cool. That was kind of interesting. I think actually the first time we ever did that was either on a Memorial Day or a Labor Day. And it was a way to try to just inject a little bit of life into, a weekend where a lot of folks are gone.
So I don't know if that would lend itself to a training day, but we've started doing these training days with Faithful and Fruitful, where we slow down and kind of like a conference, focus on one specific thing. We might be able to do a training day on how to put together and Ask Anything.
It's really doable. And I just think there's a lot of benefit to it.
So the next thing on the calendar then is Father's Day, and that's a unique opportunity. Mother's Day is everybody's coming, right? That's before Memorial Day. That's one of the biggest, most highly attended. Father's Day, there's dynamics there that, how do you deal with those?
Well, one of the decisions you have to make in this whole thing is just what's your approach to your calendar in the summer, right? So you started off asking about, vacation. And you've got to a little bit decide, are we going to do a whole series through the summer? Sometimes churches will do that. They'll kind of figure out, okay, the first Sunday in June, we're going to start a series. And then when's back to school, we're going to end it right before that. So that's one approach. Another approach is, if you're in a longer series, like say you're preaching through a long book of the Bible, you might just, hey, here we go. We're just going to keep going through the summer. Another approach would be to do a few shorter series, right? You might do a series in June and then another series in July and then another series, for part of August or something like that. So that's an approach. We've had some years for us where we have had a series, but we've intentionally said we're going to do a standalone message on Mother's Day and we're going to do a standalone message on Father's Day, where we're specifically addressing mothers and fathers. I personally, I did that once, and I'm not saying I wouldn't do it again. I'm just saying I wouldn't do it all the time. I don't think it's such a significant thing that's like you need to commit to having 2 sermons a year on that. But I think the main thing that I would think about for Father's Day is, it's interesting. I think because it's in the middle of June and because it's Father's Day, Mother's Day is always a big day, right? Because you wake up and you go, Mom, what do you want to do? And she goes, we're all going to church, right? That's what she does. If Father's Day is like, Dad, what do you want to do? He's like, let's go to breakfast, So that's kind of a bummer to me all the time.
Talk real quick about the picture that's hanging in the conference room.
Yeah, there's a picture in the conference room here at our offices. It's by Norman Rockwell. It's called Sunday Morning. And I just would encourage you, Google Sunday Morning Norman Rockwell. And what it is it's, classic Norman Rockwell style. It's this dad who's there in his pajamas and he's reading the comics and the sports page. He's got the newspaper and he's kind of slinking down in this really high backed chair. And the painting is looking at him, and then walking behind him is his wife and their kids. And it's just so cool how Rockwell does it. In the painting, the dad's hair is all disheveled. And if you look closely, his hair almost looks like horns, like a devil. He's got this red robe that's kind of hanging down almost like a devil's tail, some smoke that's coming up from his cigarette. There's lots of like devilish sort of qualities to it. But mom is prim and proper. She's in her Sunday best. The really interesting thing to me is the daughter's walking, looking at mom. The son is walking behind mom, but kind of looking toward dad. And to me, the reason we hang it there is as this picture of motivation to say, hey, this is what we want, a kind of church that's like reaching men like this. Because if you get men like this, you get the next generation, you get the family. Praise God for the faithful women who come without their husbands. Mm-hmm. Praise God for the faithful moms who are doing the hard labor to raise their kids functionally, spiritually, like single moms. But man, if we can reach men. And so one of the things that I just would encourage you to do as you're thinking about Father's Day message, it's wild to me. So many times if someone does a Mother's Day message, it's let's talk about how moms are the greatest ever. And then the Father's Day message is let's talk about how bad dads suck and don't do what they're supposed to do. And I just think that is, that's not a great strategy.
That's the Hollywood strategy.
Totally. Yeah. Why would a guy want to come to church on Sunday if he's going to get reamed for being a loser, So I'm not saying you can't challenge men. I think men want to be challenged. But I think if you're going to do a standalone message on Father's Day, encourage the guys, bless the guys, let them feel like you're rooting for them and you're in their corner and you want to help them. So much of why guys give up on stuff is they just feel like, I'll never be good at that. And I think there's a lot of men who feel like, I don't know if I'll ever be good at faith. I don't know if I'll ever be good as a leader. I don't know if I'll ever be good as a dad. And I think if, not to blow smoke at them, but to like inspire them and give them, that word, encourage them, give them courage, tell them they can do it, show them how it can be done. So I would say if you're going to, either way, you're going to probably honor dads on Father's Day. And whether you honor them just kind of in a moment in the service, prayer for them, or you honor them, through a whole sermon devoted to it, I would say just make sure that you don't spend that day railing on them. Be encouraging. I think it's a fun time to do some giveaways. Like we've done a thing before. We don't do this every year, where we've said, hey, if you're a dad, if your dad or grandpa, stand up, and we'll try to honor the newest dad, who just recently had a baby, and who has the most kids, and who's been a dad for the longest. And typically in our situation, we might do something like, hey, who's adopted the most kids? Because adoption and foster care is kind of a big deal for us. And so that's fun. And you give away some gift cards, and you give away some different stuff. I saw a church. I thought this was kind of cool. This kind of took it next level, but they had a camera crew with a live feed into their sanctuary, and they had 2 identical SUVs and 2 identical groups of stuff. And they did a competition where these 2 dads had to pack the car, and whoever could pack the car with the door shut fastest, would win some big prize or whatever. And again, that's a big church kind of thing probably. But I thought that's just fun. And so I do think it's an opportunity to have some fun. It's an opportunity to laugh and to enjoy and to encourage men.
Though it didn't really impact the preaching at all, but the church that I most recently was on staff at, 2 of the things that we did, the first one was bacon. We cooked bacon, and every dad got to leave with a strip of bacon. And I think the lobby smelled like bacon, like the rest of the summer. Like,
sure.
Like the heat just like packed that scent in there.
Sure.
And so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but everybody left with bacon. Another one that we did was we gave away Dad's root beer.
Okay.
And we had other things out there, but the kind of the pinnacle of the presentation was a big, stack of Dad's root beer. Well, I think either somebody ordered pallets instead of, packages,
okay.
or like there was an extra 0 on the end of the order.
Oh boy.
Because we were giving Dad's root beer away for like the next 18 months.
It became Father's Year.
It became Father's Year, and everybody was drinking Dad's root beer all the time.
This is a little side thing, but we did root beer floats for Father's Day this past year at our church, and I was so excited because in my family, the way everyone in my wife's family has always communicated that, hey, we're pregnant, is with root beer floats. So it's ruined root beer floats. I can't ever have a root beer float without someone thinking I'm making some big announcement. So I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna get a root beer float on Father's Day. So yeah, that was fun.
Next is 4th of July. Oh, actually, next for me is our anniversary. So
good for you.
June 30th is our anniversary. And so that falls between Father's Day.
Well, everyone, make sure you factor Dave and Sandra's anniversary into your preaching calendar.
June 30th, just so y'all know. And typically we'll combine Father's Day gift and anniversary gift together to get something. So that's next for me. So I know that I realize that impacts, maybe just a few people.
Right.
2. But that's next. After that, on everybody's calendar is 4th of July.
Yeah, and 4th of July is one of those weird days where it's like sometimes it's on the weekend, sometimes it is the Sunday, sometimes the worst almost is when it's on a Saturday, right? And everybody's just out the whole night before. So I think you just got to pay attention. Where is it, right? If 4th of July is on a Tuesday or Wednesday, it doesn't really matter. The closer it is to the weekend, the more you just probably plan on that being a relatively down weekend. Again, that would be a good place to have someone else on the team do the sermon. That'd be a place potentially to have a guest, something like that. Or if you're around, by all means do it. I don't think for the most part, in my case, I wouldn't want to do a break. I wouldn't want to break from the series for 4th of July. I would just plan on, we're going to, have whatever series we're doing. If we started a series in June, maybe it ends on, that 4th of July weekend and we start something else the next week. But generally, I just wouldn't do something for that. We're not, our main party and focus and blessing is not America, as great as we think America is, but it's really on the kingdom of God. And so I just generally wouldn't do much specific with that.
Our previous episode was all about preaching through your first year at a new church. Thinking about 4th of July, it's got me thinking that maybe just a real quick tag to that episode is, if you are preaching your first year, Memorial Day, Father's Day, 4th of July, it's probably pretty good practice to find out what typically happens during these
That's good.
days, what type of expectation. Yeah, there's expectations of what your first year will look like and what they have for you week in, week out. But man, I feel like it would be an easy opportunity if there's some tradition there that you could step into to score some, just relational points and be aware of maybe how you might want to change it in the future.
Sure.
After 4th of July, really it comes to whenever school winds up starting. Like that's the next thing on the calendar. But there are going to be some things littered in, such as camps.
Yep.
There may be some, one-day retreats. There may be some outside events happening. And here at our church, we do training days. And I can't remember if it landed on 4th of July this last year, but training days is where we get different residents at the church, and each one takes a service and they get an opportunity to speak. So I'm just going to kind of throw all of that at you. Some of these other things that don't necessarily fall on a date, but are very much a part of it.
Yeah. One that I think is worth considering is stuff related to the next generation. So youth summer camps, VBS, kids camp, stuff like that. That's I think a great opportunity to cast vision around what's going on with the next generation. It's usually not going to take over your whole Sunday. For us, most of the time, we do a kids camp, which is like a vacation Bible school. And we go all out redecorating the campus. We want it to feel special to the kids when they come. Well, what that typically means is we've got to get that, if it starts on a Monday, we've got to get that started before the last service is over on Sunday. So a lot of times that Sunday before kids camp, you'll walk on campus and it'll feel more like kids camp. And I just, for a while that kind of bothered me. Like, I don't like this. And it's like, no, that's who we are. That's okay. We've got hundreds and hundreds of kids and families and people, and we want to bless them. And so that's a thing you can do to incorporate it.
Let me speak to that real quick.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I loved at the previous church, we were going through this huge initiative to really reach families. And they said, if something's important, you dedicate real estate to it. Because if you dedicate real estate to it, it really communicates that it's valuable. If you don't give real estate to it, but you say it's valuable, it never quite reaches that same level. I love seeing all the decorations because it does communicate. I know that we value next gen. It communicates that value in that, hey, we're really willing to, maybe you look at it as inconvenience. We're willing to be inconvenienced because we know that it's worth it. Or number two, we want you to see what's going to be taking place here, because we do a good job in our Sunday services recognizing what happens in VBS and recognizing that we've got parents, adults who take their vacation for the summer to serve every day in VBS. So I just like that principle of, I think it's great that we see it because it's valuable. Dedicate real estate to it if it's something that's valuable.
Well, and again, it's probably not going to become you're not going to devote a sermon to it. But what you could really think about is incorporating something into your sermons before and after that tells stories, that casts vision, that celebrates what's going on. Similarly with summer camp, like a lot of times a bunch of kids will go to camp and inevitably they make a highlight video. Well, plan on showing that the Sunday after that and incorporate that into what you're doing in the life of the church. So I think summer's a chance to do that. And I just think every opportunity you have to show the next generation and their families, like, hey, they're not the future church, they're the current church, and to incorporate them into that, I think is a big deal. Another thing that I would just think about in terms of your overall programming is, especially if you're in a place where people are moving, one of the things you might do if people are moving to your area is be careful about overly shutting down in the summer. This is one of the challenges we have here in Arizona, Dave, is on one hand, it's so hot. Everyone wants to leave. Everyone wants to get out of here. Nobody wants to be out of their house. We just want to be in our air conditioning. On the other hand, we got gobs and gobs of new people coming. And so one of the things that we're actually going to be doing a little bit differently this year is we're going to make sure that something is happening almost every week that is more drop-in in the summer that people don't necessarily have to sign up for. And it doesn't really matter if it's going to be 15 people or if it's going to be 75 people, like just something that all the people who are coming and checking out, and they move here and they have no friends and they have no connection and they don't know anybody, they have nothing to do. And to be able to go, hey, here's something midweek that you can come join us. So I think summer's an opportunity, again, not just from the preaching, but from an overall programming standpoint to factor some of that in. Now, on the other hand, if you're in a place, high military town, high college town, where a lot of people are leaving, that's one of the things that just can be really, really discouraging. A lot of pastors I talk to will say, man, it is just May and June is just the saddest time of year for me, because every year here's a dozen people I love who are leaving. And I actually know one pastor who he decided, you know what, we're always doing these going away parties, and we should do going away parties for people who are going away. I want to do a sticking around party. And so he does a thing, I think in June, where he goes, hey, we're going to have a big sticking around party for everyone who's sticking around. And, so that can be a way to just, minister to the needs of the people in your church at that particular time. So that's something to think about. I wonder, Dave, if we ought to talk more about some of the sermon series options as well.
That's where I was going to go next. Sermon. So these are all the things that are surrounding that you are taking into account as you're preparing your sermons, as you're preparing your calendar. But what is the thrust of what you're going to make happen through the summer? So my history has been lead pastors would be gone 4 to 5 weeks in a row during the summertime.
Okay.
And so
just probably in a larger church environment, that would be more possible.
So that's what my history is. And there may be a series that happens, but it wouldn't be uncommon for it to just be 4 or 5 weeks of one-offs. So that's what I'm used to until I was no longer on church staff.
Yeah.
And then it would be a series. How do you approach that, and what kinds of series do you like aiming for during the summer?
Well, it is really location specific, right? So one of the things I realized a few years ago was, one of my least favorite holidays is 4th of July in Arizona. One of my favorite holidays is 4th of July in the Midwest, where my wife is from. So we've just made a thing like, hey, we're just always gone for 4th of July. And it's interesting because when we go, my wife's from Toledo, Ohio, and when we go there, it's July. Everyone here is trying to get out of here. Well, everyone there's sticking around. I mean, her whole family, if they're going to travel and do vacation, they're going to do it in February when it's like, we're tired of the gray and the cold. They're going to do it in the fall. They're not doing it in the summer. And so when we go visit their church there, their lead pastor's always there. And if I was in that setting, I would do that. That makes sense. Like I wouldn't necessarily just be trying to get out of town just because it's summer. I think that's especially the case here. So you just have to play around a little bit with that. With that said, I do think if you're planning on having guests in the summer, if you're planning on having especially guests from outside the church, guest speakers, it really, be kind to them by giving them some flexibility. If you're going to make them, and I've seen churches do different things. So some will go, hey, we're going to do a series called Best Sermon Ever, where we're going to invite these 4 guest speakers and we're going to say, do your best sermon that you've ever done. And it's going to kind of be just 4 random sermons, which sounds kind of like what you were describing at the church you were at. I think that's kind of a cool idea. We've never done that. 4 guest speakers seems like a lot of honorarium to me to give away. And we're blessed that we have some other communicators who can fill in those gaps. But short of that, you might also go, okay, a lot of churches will do summer psalms where you're going to do just an arrangement of psalms. Well, that's nice if you have a guest speaker, because rather than him having to be assigned something, he probably has a sugar stick sermon of some psalm that he's done before, and you can do that. So I think that's an appropriate thing. Either way, as you think about planning the summer, if you know you're going to have guests, what I'd say is have relatively short passages, have relatively familiar passages. Because if you're going to ask them to prepare a sermon, it's really not kind for you to be, hey, by the way, I'm going to need you to preach on these 4 chapters from Ecclesiastes. That's going to be heavy lifting, and that just wouldn't be very kind. So I would factor that in the process. And then the other thing that is real popular, I know, in the summer is at the movies. Everyone likes to do at the movies, it seems like. I think that, as best as I can tell, did the church you were at, did you guys ever do at the movies?
I don't think we ever did at the movies, but we would occasionally, movies would get worked into different things, but not necessarily in the summer.
Yeah, as best as I can tell, that was started by Craig Rochelle and Life Church. And from what I understand, it is like highly evangelistic. And they go all out. I mean, I know people on social media will critique them, but I mean, you talk about changing the real estate. It's like the whole church building feels like the best movie theater you've ever been to, and they're doing popcorn and they're doing this stuff, and it's kind of over the top. And my understanding is in that environment, they like have thousands of new guests that come. You know, I know a church in Dallas, Lake Point, that does a similar kind of thing. But I'll tell you, and I don't know if this is a very popular opinion or a very unpopular opinion, but in most other places, I think at the movies is just lame. Like, I think unless you're going to go all out like that, and it really like makes sense and fits with some evangelistic strategy, it mostly to me feels like a corny thing that you're just stealing from somebody else that actually isn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially because right now the media landscape is so fractured, like nobody's seen these movies, you know,
Right.
even like
Not everybody's seen every movie that
like,
you would do.
Right. Even like I think about a movie that was wildly popular this year, Barbie, and tons of people didn't see it. Right. And Top Gun before that was like, oh man, Top Gun. Well, a lot of people still aren't seeing that. And so I just think, I don't know. To me, it feels forced and it feels corny most of the time. I'm sure there's good ways to do it. I'm not against it in principle. What I am against is guys doing it just because it seems cool. It's like if it's gonna do what you want it to do and you're gonna go all in to do it, then hey, knock yourself out. Otherwise, like, you know, I don't know. It feels weird.
One of the exercises we went through when we were coming up with mission, vision, values at the church I was on staff with was to really survey the people in the church, survey the staff, and identify what does your church do really well?
Yeah, sure.
What are you fantastic at? Do more of that.
Yeah, totally.
And so what I hear you saying is, look, if that's an area where your church excels, theme, architecture, all sorts of accessories to promote, like if you guys can pull that off and that's an area where you thrive, hey, go after it.
Mm-hmm, sure.
But if that's not an area where you thrive, it really is just kind of putting lipstick on a pig, so to speak.
Yeah, sure.
For the sake of doing it. And there's probably something your church is really, really gifted at that you could do instead. And it would have the same, it might not have the same appeal to the same demographic, but it would have the same impact to whatever demographic it would appeal to.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I think about as it relates to planning your preaching through the summer is as you are getting closer to back to school, it's a great moment to either do some sermons or to work in some application points that relate to community, participating in group life, serving, inviting, evangelism, those kinds of things that are going to be things you want to see take place as back to school really kicks in. Having opportunities to tell stories about that, even to preach shorter sermons or series about that, I think could be a really good idea as well. So it is trying to go, okay, how are we going to lay the groundwork for this, and how are we going to prepare people for what's coming in this fall launch? We talk about that more in the fall launch episode, but I think that's a good way to think about the preaching through the summer.
You're going into the last point that we want to talk about in this episode is slowing down and working on stuff, not just in stuff. The difference being when you're working in stuff, you really are just trying to service the moment, whereas where you're working on stuff, you're trying to build for the future and get ahead. How do you approach that principle and in the summertime?
Yeah, well, the nice part in the summertime is that generally speaking, a lot of other things slow down. You know, a lot of your once a month commitments on this and weekly commitments on that tend to go away a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So it opens up some space. You know, a lot of times somebody on your team who you'd normally would have a one-on-one meeting with, well, they're going to travel, they're going to be out of town, and it's going to open up more room. So I do think it's a great opportunity to plan. There's a resource that we have that folks can find. Maybe we can put a link to this about how to do a personal retreat day. It's an incredible resource to step back and to zoom out and to plan and to be thinking ahead. So I think that's a good way to do it. You know, I do a thing, and again, this is part of, you know, having part of living in Arizona and part of having a church that's just really generous to me. You know, but I realized a number of years ago, as the summer wears on, I need some, I'm going to go crazy. So I started this thing that I just call it Operation Sanity. And basically what I do is in July and August, and oftentimes even in September, almost every year, I'll have like once a month where I'll go spend a day or two in somewhere cooler, right? I'm a 2-3 hour drive away from the mountains here in Arizona. Well, it's a little bit cooler. I can go up to Flagstaff, 3 hours away. And if I just work remotely for a couple days, it's just crazy how life-giving that is. I'm a 5.5 hour drive from San Diego. So sometimes I'll do that. And we have, development budget, and and I'm not staying at the Hotel Coronado, but I can find a simple hotel for a night or for two and be able to stay there and be able to do sermon prep and do planning. And just being away helps me not only just experience a different environment that helps keep me encouraged throughout a depressing hot summer, but it also makes it where I'm planning ahead, I'm thinking ahead, and I almost always come back refreshed and energized. And so that's why it doesn't have to be 5 weeks away. It might just be, 48 hours away in a different place, thinking about different stuff. And you come back, and again, summer provides a great opportunity to do that.
One of my friends actually will get away for probably 2 or 3 days during the summer to prep the sermon calendar. I don't know where it's picking up and where it's leaving off, but that's what he'll do. He'll take 2 or 3 days, get away, usually with the associate pastor, and they will just put the sermon calendar together and enjoy that time to do that specific thing.
Yeah,
but
I've
it is
done
very
that.
much a working getaway.
Yeah, I've done that. I've also had a time. I remember this was a few years ago. I'd love to do this again, but I just put a note card on every chair on the Sunday before I was heading out, and I said, "Here's what I'd love you to do: is would you write a prayer request on this card? Put your name on it if you want. If you don't want to put your name on it, that's fine. But if you write a prayer request on this card, here's what I'm guaranteeing you: in the next week, I will pray for whatever you put on that card." And I took my big stack of note cards away, and and would just pray through a chunk of them each day while I was away on kind of like you're saying, like a working retreat. And oh my gosh, Dave, like it was so helpful. Like you go, what are people going through? Well, I knew when they put it on there. In some cases, if they wrote their name, then there was an opportunity to follow up with them and to text them or to set up a meeting after. Go, hey, you wrote this prayer request, like maybe we need to talk about this, and man, that was just so helpful. So yeah, I mean, I'd say use opportunities like that. It really can make a difference.
Summers are different all across the country. I really, as much as I don't like the extreme heat, those 31 consecutive days, I really do like enjoy Arizona. I enjoy the season of the summer. And I like the fact that, our church is intentional with how we handle the summers, and we're not gone every week.
Yeah.
It's with our kids, just where they're at, how much it costs to travel.
Sure.
I like that it doesn't feel like we take the summers off at our church. It feels very much like business as usual, different, but usual.
Well, and we've found, I mean, more often than not, and again, we're in a growing area. More often than not, we grow in the summer.
Yeah.
And here's what's interesting. It doesn't feel like that because the actual attendance on any given week in the summer might be down still over normal, but you notice it in the fall because once everybody's back, it bumps up.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. A lot of those new people didn't start coming in the fall. They started coming in the summer. It's just in the fall, all the normal people that were gone in the summer come back and you go, oh, wow, we grew in the fall. Actually, you grew in the summer. Because that's when people move. That's when they take the new job. They don't move after school started. They move in June so they can be here for a month to get ready for school to start, right? So that's why we can't throw away summer. We do have to think about like it actually is a key time for growing the church.
Preaching Through Podcast, Season 2, Episode 10. Season 2 is now complete. It's been so much fun to spend these last 10 weeks with you, just talking through ministry, talking through what it looks like to preach through the different seasons of ministry, the different nuances. If you have not listened to all of the episodes, Season 1, there are 10 episodes there. There's a bonus episode, and now there's an entire catalog of Season 2. Luke, anything you want to say to all of our pastors who are listening and just enjoy, being a part of what we do here?
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is help you be faithful and fruitful. So this is a podcast of that ministry, Faithful and Fruitful. We want you to be faithful to God, faithful to your calling, faithful to your family, and we want you to be fruitful. We want you to be effective. If you're going to spend all this time doing it, my goodness, let's figure out how to do it well. And, God controls the fruit. God controls the outcomes, but that's what we want to help you do. So if there's just other stuff that we can help you with, if there's other things that you need, email us, info@faithfulandfruitful.com. We'd love to be available to be helpful. And Dave, I want to thank you. I mean, you do a lot of work on this podcast, making sure we get these recorded, getting these updated and uploaded, getting videos out on social media that, have fun little excerpts from these conversations. And you always come prepared, and I'm thankful for you. So,
thanks, man. I appreciate that. I enjoy it a lot. I like you, so I like hanging out with you, but it is a lot of fun to get to be one of those voices to just encourage preachers where they're at and, keep getting better, right?
Yeah.
Keep getting better, keep drawing closer to God. Just recently in my own walk, somebody asked the question, when do you feel furthest from God? And I was like, oh man, that's a great question. When do I feel closest to God? Like that was the direction. And so my hope is that through these conversations, there would be times when you, listener, would be drawing closer to God and just feeling like, man, this is what I needed to hear in the moment I needed to hear it. You can go to faithfulandfruitful.com/news to sign up for the newsletter. Not only do we send out helpful, hopefully insightful emails regularly, but we have all sorts of new events and new trainings that we're working on and we're going to be releasing, and we would love to share those with you as they happen. But yep, that's it. Season 2 Preaching Through podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.